Welcome, everyone. We are thrilled to have you join us for this installment of the USU, Coalition of Urban Serving Universities webinar series. As you can see, this is the Equity and Excellence at Urban Serving Universities, and we're pleased to have three presidents who are members of the Coalition of Urban Serving Universities join us to provide their insights. Those three presidents are Ann Cudd, president of Portland State University, Kimberly Espy, the president of Wayne State University, and Lynn Miranda, who is the chancellor of the University of Illinois, Chicago. I do want to take a quick moment because we are offering this in collaboration with our colleagues at the Association for Undergraduate Education at Research Universities, UERU. And I wanted to take a moment, since some of you may be new to the Coalition of Urban Serving Universities, and just welcome you from all of us. I am the executive director of that Coalition of Urban Serving Universities, as well as the vice president of urban initiatives at APLU. And I wanted to say that we are so thrilled to be offering this in collaboration with our colleagues at UERU. Those of us with the U beginning organizational names at the end of the alphabet line. But both organizations have similar missions and similar constituencies in the R1 and R2 research university space, which makes us incredibly good partners. However, we also have some important differences that enhance that collaboration. The Coalition of Urban Serving Universities is a president-led membership association committed to enhancing urban university engagement and tackling key urban challenges in our nation's cities in the 21st century. While typically located in major metropolitan areas and urban centers, go far beyond the idea of being committed to an urban initiative just because of a zip code. It is truly an ethos and a mission-driven agenda. So USU is unique for the presidential membership, for their public research university missions, and to the idea of connecting local, regional, and national networks, as well as developing and scaling innovations necessary to deliver equitable outcomes for today's post-secondary students, which we all know are varied and come from really interesting and diverse backgrounds. USU campuses are regularly recognized for excellence in the areas of equitable student success, career and workforce development, as well as advancing personal and community health. We really have this connection to people, place, connection, and scaling innovative solutions. And so around that, I'm thrilled to hand over the virtual podium to my colleague, Steve Diazno from UERU, to introduce the mission of this panel, as well as to go ahead and get us started. But we are looking forward to having all of you participants also ask questions of these esteemed colleagues who are joining us today. So thank you all for joining us. I especially want to thank the panelists and our UERU colleagues for being here with us today. It's always wonderful to play in this space with great people and great colleagues.
Thanks, Jennifer, and thanks to USU for this collaboration. We're really very grateful for it. UERU, as I think a lot of folks know, is about 125-member university association. We were founded in 2000 and hosted at Colorado State University since 2013. And I serve as the executive director and as an associate provost at CSU. And we're absolutely joining you in welcoming and expressing our gratitude to this distinguished panel. We're just delighted by this opportunity. I mentioned our founding in 2000, which means UERU is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. It was President Shirley Strum Kenny of the State University of New York at Stony Brook who founded UERU in 2000, and she was the chair, as many know, of the 1998 Boyer Commission. And we will honor Dr. Strum Kenny with a full-page ad in the Chronicle of Higher Education next week as part of the kicking off our 25th anniversary celebration. Today, however, we're centering the Boyer 2030 report, which doubles down on that original 1998 Boyer report. It's been downloaded over 30,000 times just in its first 2 years of availability. And it centers the idea that equity and excellence, in the words of the Boyer 2030 commissioners, are inextricably entwined in a democracy, and which that report, like the original report, was primarily addressed to presidents and provosts and other senior leaders of universities here in the United States. So the first question then to our panel makes that connection, and I'll read it. It is sometimes said, and often said, really, I think that urban serving universities are anchor institutions for metropolitan areas. You don't have to be a sociologist like me to know that the United States is an urban society with over 80% of our citizens living in metropolitan areas. So they're anchor institutions for metropolitan areas, and that our cities are laboratories for learning. How does this embeddedness aid your institution's contribution to meeting what the Boyer 2030 Commission called the equity excellence imperative? And how does it help further our democratic ways of life generally? Who would like to be first to address that? President Cudd, perhaps we go in alphabetical order.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you, Steve and Jennifer. Thank you to USU and UERU for having us. It's a joy to be here today and to talk about this really important report that's chock full of good recommendations and good thoughts. So we at Portland State often say that Portland State and Portland rise and fall together. And fortunately, actually, I think our Chamber of Commerce and our City Council also say that as well. And I think that the post-pandemic era, and as well as the pandemic era for that matter, in Portland brought that really into sharp relief, in the sense that as the reputation of Portland was really sullied by many events that happened here, that was really painful to Portland State. And yet they're looking at us as as a key driver of the resurgence of the city. So I was fortunate to work with the governor's Central City Task Force and looking at that, working with that and the city's economic development strategic plan called Advance Portland. We really think that the future of cities, and especially Portland, will be built on a foundation of education, arts, and culture. Universities like Portland State are engines of innovation and creativity. They provide diverse perspectives to their constituents. Their research is urban serving, and we're a hub for arts and culture. And at the same time, our urban setting really is a laboratory for learning for our students. On sharp display is the human struggle, the challenges, as well as creativity of human beings. So Portland State is really dedicated to driving Portland's economic, social, and cultural resurgence. As I mentioned, we adopted that as one of our imperatives of our strategic plan. And that means that we want to engage our students in our city's opportunities and challenges. And that is key to differentiating our academic experience from that of many other institutions, and in particular, the other public institutions in Oregon. And being in Portland allows us, being right in the downtown area of Portland, allows us access to opportunities that are afforded by a dense and diverse cultural urban environment. So our undergraduate students all participate in a community-engaged capstone experience, often in a nonprofit that provides services to marginalized communities, to homeless individuals, or to mental and behavioral health providers. We also have internship programs in the major industries of our region, from stop action animation, filmmaking, to semiconductor manufacturing, to trucking and transportation. And our state legislature and city and county governments are really chock full of our graduates who are now elected officials and staff, and they got their start in PSU student government and as PSU interns in City Hall. So this is, I think, how we educate for world readiness, as the Boyer 2030 Commission calls it, preparing students for lives in the world and with the future in mind.
I guess I'll pick up from there. I think E comes after C, so there you go. And it's really neat to me to see the parallels and communalities amongst our institutions, despite being in different places. I'll set the stage a little bit about Wayne State. We are one of 3 R1 universities in the state of Michigan. There are a total of 15 public universities. You know, we have U of M and MSU. And each of us sits at a very different spot. So much like Anne was talking about, Wayne State fundamentally defines itself relative to being in the heart of the city of Detroit. There's a main line that kind of goes up north throughout the metropolitan area, and we're right on that. We're about a mile outside of the core of downtown, which sits at the edge because Canada is actually below us to the south. And, you know, we, like the other institutions here, are committed to serving those in our community. Our students primarily come from Michigan. Most of them work in the Southeast Michigan when they finish. About 80% of our students stay, about 45% of our students are Pell eligible. 7 out of every 10 are students of color. But it's a very diverse mosaic here. You know, 20% are African American, 17% Asian, 12% Middle Eastern, North African, 10% Hispanic. So it really is a polyglot that provides such a rich learning environment and reflects so many of our cities, whether it's now or into the future. So we always talk about that you can learn as much about yourself in the high quality R1 environment as you can learning from others, right? Because that's such an important part of our democracy. And much like Anne was talking about, we've really leaned into serving our community, reflective of the Boyer Report. We have what we call the Wayne State University Prosperity Agenda, and it's about 3 key pillars: accelerating social mobility, empowering health for our communities, and really fueling innovation, turning research into technologies and into small business. So you really see those parallels. Notice too, they all use motor words, hence the, you know, Detroit and the Motor City, right? And it's interesting when I see some of the things that we're doing on the ground to really live out what's talked about relative to equity and excellence being intertwined. Is, you know, sure, we're all about opening the doors as wide as we can so we can be that engine of opportunity. And of course, to realize that opportunity, you need to be successful. So much like the institutions here and across the country in both URU and USU, we've really focused on student success. But really the next frontier is making sure that that first job and transition to career is as successful as possible. And so we try to take full advantage of the Detroit environment, whether it's internships at the big 3 or the OEMs, or whether it's with our small community nonprofits, of which we have many. Philanthropy is a really large part of what we do here in Detroit. Or whether it's in the schools or in the hospitals. 1/3 of our students study in health writ large, from medicine to health IT, for example. That's a real core part to make sure that students not only have the skills that they learn from our faculty who are on the cutting edge of discovery, but they're applying them from day one. Empowering health is all about giving community the tools, not just being in tertiary care environment of, you know, addressing cardiac disease when you're in full throat heart attack, but how do you bend the curve of population health earlier? And then, you know, Detroit has not been one that's been as focused on a lot of innovation within certain sectors, but not really being intentional about pipeline of going from research through the valley of death to entities to business. And so we've really focused on trying to strengthen the early part of the pipeline, because interesting, Wayne State does do a lot of community business development, but hasn't always been as firmly connected to our research enterprise as one would imagine. So maybe that's a good time for me to transition over to Lynn.
Yeah. So thank you for including me on this panel. It's pretty fun for me. Anne and I have been friends for a long time. Kim, you and I don't know each other as well, but of course, I think you know that I grew up in Detroit. So I have a very special place in my heart for Wayne State, which everything you said about the importance of Wayne State to Detroit as a city rings very true with my lived experience as a native Detroiter. And don't tell the people here in Chicago, but Detroit's still my favorite city.
Well, we've got to welcome you back and come talk to our folks.
The deputy health director in Detroit once said to me after he heard me talk about something, he looked at me, he started laughing, and he said, "Boy, you can take the girl out of Detroit, but you can't take the Detroit out of the girl." So,
isn't that the truth? I love that.
So, here I am. So, you know, UIC's mission is to provide the broadest access to the highest levels of educational research and clinical excellence. 56% of our students are Pell Grant recipients. About half of them are first-gen college students, and our clinics focus on the most underserved communities in the city of Chicago. And right here on our campus is the Jane Addams Hull House, the legendary social reformer Jane Addams, and that whole movement, the development of sociology, the development of this idea that you have to think about what's going on in the community around you and engage with it, et cetera. So we take that legacy and our connection to Jane Addams very seriously. So at the same time that we have all these things that we're doing for our students, it is also the case that our faculty annually bring in $500 million in research funding. And what that means is that, it's a sign of the exquisite excellence of our faculty, that they're competing their ideas nationally and internationally and winning. But it is a sign of how deeply committed the faculty are to our mission. Because they could be at a lot of different places and they choose to be here with our student body. We're a minority serving institution. It's just incredible to see the devotion to mission. And if you spend any time at all thinking about that mission, it's really about two ideas. It's about access and excellence, making sure that everybody has access to world-class healthcare, making sure everybody has access to a really good education, and making sure that the research and the teaching and the clinical services that we provide, they all reach a level of excellence that is unsurpassed, right? So access and excellence, which sounds a lot like the things that the Boyer report says is important, is deeply rooted in our mission here. So we feel that we're able to deliver on that mission. We're the #1 university in the state of Illinois for social mobility, and we're the 10th nationally for social mobility. And I mostly don't pay any attention to these rankings, and the only one I care about and want to make sure that we're performing well against is social mobility. So I think, Anne, at the very beginning of your remarks, you made this remark about Portland, the city of Portland and Portland State rise and fall together. And I would say, we say something very similar, which is that UIC needs Chicago to be successful, and Chicago needs UIC to be successful, because we're educating the city of Chicago's workforce. We're the only public R1 institution in the 3rd largest city in the country. So our students are composing the workforce. Our faculty are engaged with nonprofit organizations, community groups across the city of Chicago and across the state of Illinois. And we also do a lot of collaborative work in terms of innovation engines. We have places where people from the community can come and work with our students. We have our faculty founding companies, et cetera. For any of you on this call who are old enough to have gotten the shingles vaccine, chances are if you got the shingles vaccine, which is the better one with fewer side effects, that was developed here at UIC. So the interesting thing about the research that goes on here, we do lots of basic research, but there's this deep, deep commitment to solving the world's problems. And we have a particular lens on the things that our home city and our home state are struggling with. So that connection to being an urban serving institution is very important to us. Although I will say that we actually do a lot to serve the entire state. We have our main campus here in Chicago, but we have facilities in Rockford, Peoria, Quad Cities, Springfield, and Urbana. And by that, I don't mean the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. I mean, we have a healthcare enterprise in Urbana. So 1 out of every 3 doctors in the state of Illinois did some of their training here at UIC. The 1 out of 3 pharmacists in the state of Illinois did their training at UIC. 1 out of 3 dentists in the state of Illinois did their training at UIC. We've trained 8,000 active nurses across the state. 1 out of every 4 social workers, 1 out of every 9 principals in Chicago public schools. So the whole idea of developing these critically important workforces for cities and states to thrive, for regions to thrive, is really is quite important to us. So I think, like my two colleagues on the call, we're deeply committed to our city, and it's important to us that our city recognizes the things that we're doing to build up and lift up the city, and it's a very positive, symbiotic relationship. So, and you know, the food here is great.
Well, President Andrews Espy used the term OEM, and because I'm a Michigander also and worked in the automobile industry, I happen to know that that means original equipment manufacturer, aka supplier company, right? And because of USU in the past, the Student Experience Project, I was able to visit Portland State University for a meeting there and saw the amazing campus that they have in Portland right off this beautiful park and near these beautiful museums, and it's just an amazing place. And I should mention, I also had the Shingrix vaccine for shingles because I'm old enough for that, and URU benefits from having Vice Provost Nikos Varelas of UIC serve as our current president and board chair. And we're very grateful to UIC for loaning us Nikos on occasion for that leadership role. Here's our second question for you all, which is, URU is focused very narrowly on undergraduate education at research universities, which there's a lot more that goes on at our universities, even at research universities, let alone all the other kinds of institutions of higher learning that we have in the United States. So the question is, what is from your perspectives, what is the role and significance of undergraduate education at urban serving research universities? How does it relate to all the other things that you do, that your institutions do? And maybe since maybe we could change the order and start with Wayne State on this one.
Sure. So I'm happy to take that one first. And again, to set a little bit of context, we're at about 24,000 total enrolled. And of that, about 2/3 are undergrads and 1/3 are grads. And so obviously, like most institutions, the undergrad portion of our work certainly is much larger and at scale. That wasn't always true at Wayne State. Wayne State was actually founded as a medical university from a bunch of Civil War docs that then kind of agglomerated and picked up different things along the way and became a full service institution. And so the undergrad piece, while critical, it's interesting, that with that history, kind of you see that reflected in the amount of students who are studying health. For us, similar to the way my two colleagues talked, is when you think about what's special, it really is that notion of being of students having the opportunity to learn from and work directly with faculty who are at the cutting edge of discovery. And that benefits them in a couple of ways, right? First of all, they get to be in that process of developing the knowledge themselves, whether it's their undergraduate research or community service learning, the full range of studying abroad, in the full ways that can enrich that experience. But as importantly, we don't always talk about it this way. There's kind of a speed to market relative to knowledge, that when you're in classrooms with faculty who are at that level, you get quicker access to the knowledge that's current in a way that's different than by the time something makes its way into a textbook. And I say that in no means to diminish the work that happens in our institutions that are more regionally focused, but it is an advantage for a student who wants to go on to either graduate school or in a professional capacity, that it creates a different environment of discourse, of discovery, of playing with ideas, because faculty, that's a part of what they do every day. Our research enterprise is not quite as large as UIC. We're at about 250 million, but that is part and parcel. And because too, like the way Lynn described it, you know, our faculty are working on challenges that afflict Detroit. We have a large legacy of manufacturing that has a benefit relative to economics, but it also has a downside relative to some of the infrastructure and some of the environmental impacts, for example. So we have a lot of faculty who are working on environmental health and the intersection of what that plays for our communities. So these sorts of things provide students opportunities, but also kind of ground them in the sense of why. You know, students today are so interested in impact and making a difference. And so they come at their studies with wanting to, you know, get engaged and involved. And in some ways, because of that local context, that provides a natural hook. And so we find that that enables students to enrich their experience and helps with persistence and successful completion too.
Chancellor, would you like to go next?
Sure. Well, it's hard to follow that because, you know, everything that Kim was saying about the importance, like being an R1 institution that still has a deep commitment to undergraduate. So we have 34,000 students, 24,000 of whom are undergraduate students. And everything you said about you have opportunities for students to, with a big research portfolio, you have opportunities for students to engage with that. I love your phrase, speed to not, what was it? Speed to knowledge. And I would emphasize, actually, you mentioned it in passing at the end, but I would emphasize even more that opportunity to engage in research is a proven best practice in terms of retention and graduation. So everything that Kim said about how the research enterprise at our institutions, which is deeply tied to the issues in our home community, and because our student bodies are deeply tied to our home communities and therefore the issues in our home communities, it creates this like integrated place of learning and personal and professional development. The other thing that I would add to that is that you can't get at access, you know, issues of access and equity and excellence if you're not really, somebody has to focus on undergraduate education. Like if everybody's focused on graduate education, then we don't have a diverse set of students coming out of undergraduate education. So the idea, especially if you're concerned, as I think all three of us are, about educating your home community and your home state's workforce, it's got to begin at undergraduate education, and you have to make sure you're delivering something critically important, and that's how we make our cities stronger. I will say we spend a lot of time working collaboratively with the public schools, certainly Chicago public schools, but public schools in the whole Chicagoland area and across the state, actually, on making sure that, you know, students have kind of a seamless transition from high school to UIC, so that they know if they're taking IB courses or AP courses, or they're dually enrolled, et cetera, how that's going to play into their enrollment here at UIC. And we also have very strong collaborations, and our vice provost that Steve mentioned, Nikos Varelas, really leads this effort for us. We have very close collaborations with community colleges across the state. So one of the things that we've done with, for example, City Colleges of Chicago, is we've mapped every single course that you could possibly take at City Colleges of Chicago and said, what would that count for at UIC? So if you want to start in a community college, but you think you eventually want to transfer to UIC and you want to be a economics major or a business major of some type, what are the courses you should be taking while you're enrolled in community college? So you transfer all of those credits, and you don't, and even if all of those credits transfer, it's also the case that they count towards the degree that you want to pursue. So we're, making sure that kids can come to us smoothly from high school, that they can come to us smoothly through community colleges to UIC, and we're doing a lot of close work with the advising systems in both high schools and in community colleges, because what you hear about a lot in undergraduate education, and that drop off of kids who come and then just can't get themselves to graduation is community college felt really different, and or high school felt really different. So we spent a lot of time talking about the warm handoff between the services that students had available to them at other places and how we have a warm handoff. So our advisors are working very closely with community college advisors and high school guidance counselors, et cetera. So for us, the commitment to undergraduate education is part and parcel of our mission. And I will also say, as someone who, at the moment, I am not actively teaching, but as someone who absolutely ended up in the academy because the classroom was just one of the most wonderful communities I'd ever been part of, when I had the opportunity to teach for the first time, that, undergraduates, the developmental trajectory that they're on, both traditionally aged undergraduate students, but also students who are non-traditionally aged, whatever that means. It is just an enormous time of growth, and having the privilege to work with students as they're going through that growth is, I can't imagine any faculty member, here at UAC, willingly walking away from that opportunity to have such meaningful work as part of their daily portfolio.
Yeah, if I could just pick up a couple of themes. I mean, what my colleagues have said really resonates a lot with me. But Portland State is a little bit different. We were founded as an extension school for veterans coming back from World War II. We weren't even a university until relatively recently. We are an R2, probably aspiring to R1 status, and probably pretty close to that, doing about $100 million of research a year, and with about 21,000 students, and roughly the two-thirds, one-third, two-thirds undergraduate, one-third graduate students. And frankly, we used to be much larger. We used to be almost 30,000 students. So this speaks to the decline of Portland, which we are really trying to turn around. But back to the question, I think that urban serving universities really serve their regions and their cities most fundamentally by providing access to education that propels learners to the frontiers of knowledge and creative activity, and creates an engaged and skilled workforce and citizenry. Like I think Kim said at Wayne State, something like 80% of our alumni stay in the region and work in industry here. So really, it's important that our undergraduate programs provide that leap into the middle class and into industry and other areas of the workforce. And PSU, like I think many urban serving universities are access institutions, try to be very affordable with low barriers to entry, provide equitable access for all learners. And as such, they're really an entry point for opportunity and enable social and economic mobility. And we're probably not in the top 10, but we are first in Oregon in social mobility, and I believe we're in the top 20 nationally in those terms as well. But I wanted to sort of flip the research undergraduate student connection just a little bit to say that, the students who come to Portland State, so many are first generation, they're low income students, and they bring, many students are Native students, Native Americans, and they bring perspectives and community connections that enable our research faculty to engage with diverse issues and authentic community problems and needs. So they really actually even stimulating in some ways the research the research enterprise. So for example, some of our students are studying homelessness, and one interesting project was using comics to tell the lived experience of homeless individuals. And in fact, sadly, many of our students are either homeless or insecure, housing insecure. And we, of course, try to help them with that, but they bring a lived experience that's very informative and useful for our research and creative activities. So I think, we are so committed to both the research enterprise and to high impact practices like community engaged research or service learning and those sort of things, because of the kind of students we're trying to serve, and the kind of education, the excellent education that really prepares them with.
Speed to market, warm handoff, leap into the middle class. These are words to live by. We're grateful to you for these, these contributions. We have one last question. I want to remind those of you who might like to pose a question to the panel to please put those questions in the Q&A function, and we're going to get to those pretty soon. But we have this one last question. You don't have to be a discerning observer of higher education in the U.S. to see that a lot of our leaders across the country are facing all kinds of challenges that come from lots of different quarters, and that, there's a lot that goes into the work that you all do as senior most leaders of your institutions that we could all learn from. And the question is, could you maybe perhaps, if you wouldn't mind, reflect on your respective pathways to your presidencies and chancellorship, and the role played by your engagement in undergraduate education in that. It's already been touched on a bit, but maybe you could say a little bit more about that explicitly, especially for our URU audience. But I hope it's, I'm sure, of interest to everyone who's part of this program. Thanks. And perhaps we could begin with the Chancellor this time.
Okay. Well, I don't think I'm that interesting of a person, so telling my life story is not that interesting. But as I mentioned early on, I grew up in Detroit, and I had the opportunity. When I was applying to colleges, I had the opportunity to go to. I was given I didn't go to any of the public institutions in Michigan because I was given a full scholarship to a private institution. So I went undergraduate to Duke, and everything was paid for. And, my family is immigrant, first one in the family, born in the United States. And that was just amazing. And and my brothers also had this, had this experience of having the chance to get an undergraduate degree was transformative for me. And so I always, as much as I'm completely and totally devoted to UIC, in my heart, I know that Duke provided me with the transformative experience at this point in my life that it just changed my trajectory forever. And I never actually thought that I was going to go into academics when I finished my doctorate. I thought I was going to get a real job working in the real world. But I had this opportunity I was asked to teach a course, and my dissertation advisor used to always say to me, of all the students I've ever mentored, you belong in the academy. And I would say, oh, you're projecting, that's not me. So I was offered an opportunity to teach a course, not be a TA, but teach a course. And I didn't need to do it. I had a fellowship. I didn't need the money. My dissertation advisor asked me to do it anyway. And really just because of the way that I was raised, that this person who was my mentor and so important to me and more experienced asked me to do this thing, that could be a source of professional development. I agreed to do it. And I was, halfway through my first class session, and I couldn't believe how much I loved it. Like that community you're trying to establish with the students, like the excitement when they get like their mind lights on fire because of an idea that they've connected with, the way that they are building their own friendships with each other, and you're building a relationship with the entire community in the class. So it took me by great surprise that I ended up in the academy. And so at various points in time, like how did I end up in leadership? It felt a little bit serendipitous, where there were I was running undergraduate programs at my first faculty job was at Duke. I was running undergraduate programs in the School of the Environment, and got approached about a deanship right around the time when I was thinking about, I like working on this undergraduate programming stuff, but there are these issues that operate at the whole school level that everything we're doing at the undergraduate level could be more effective if these things were happening. And that's kind of the story of my life, of my progression in academic leadership, is I reached a point where I realized, oh, if I actually want to affect access and equity across all undergraduates, you can't really do that from the decanal perch. Then you have to think about a provostial perch, et cetera. And I was, just prior to coming here, I was the provost at the University of Notre Dame. And Anne knows this story well, because we had a conversation about this. And, you know, Notre Dame is a fantastic institution, and it's very well resourced, and you have an idea and you can find the money to do it. And the campus is beautiful. But I felt like I couldn't spend enough of my time working with the students that I believed our democracy called us to work with. And you know, at the same time that Anne was thinking about going to Portland State, I was talking about all of this, and around the same time, UIC came and was looking for a new chancellor, and here it was in the Midwest, and I love the Midwest. The emphasis on access and equity, access and excellence were so important to me. It had a big medical center that is critically important to population health in the city of Chicago. So the opportunity to really be of greater service, to be a servant leader, and to be part of an institution that is absolutely essential to to the city of Chicago, but also absolutely essential to democracy. It was and I love it here. It's so hard. It's so hard. These jobs are so hard, and resources are so constrained, and the problems are so complicated. But as I like to tell my husband, every day I feel I work really hard for people who deserve to have more people working hard on their behalf.
That's a beautiful story. Well said. I love that. And a lot of my story probably resonates in a lot of ways with that, especially with really wanting to go to an institution that is more about equity, access, as well as excellence, rather than elite, rankings and that sort of thing. My family's road to the middle class was paved by the equity excellence agenda that was embedded in the founding of land grant institutions by the Morrill Act. I'm not a first generation college student, but my mother was. I keep a photo in my office of my grandmother and her sister as young teenagers at the turn of the last century, washing clothes in this big wooden tub basin. And I think about how this was an activity that took hours of labor almost every day. Hours and hours of their lives were spent, washing clothes over those basins. My grandmother never attended high school. My mother, though, the youngest of 18 children, she was the one who left the farm to go to the University of Wisconsin and eventually earn a master's degree and have a professional career as a librarian, a career that I really think embodies the spirit of liberal education and civic engagement. And she revered and lived out the Wisconsin idea that many of you, I'm sure, know about, that the benefits of higher education should extend to all of citizens in society. And I see that Wisconsin idea also reflected in the motto of Portland State, which is let knowledge serve the city. So my journey to this, to the presidency of this amazing urban research university went through public and private institutions, and like Lynn. But I was inspired by the students who were really seeking to find a better life for themselves and their families through education. And I think that they taught me how to reach them through authentic, world-engaged teaching that strives for excellence through equity, embracing difference and diversity of thought and ideas. Early on as a philosophy professor, I adopted service learning and structured classroom debates as two of my core teaching methods. So I was very engaged in high impact practices right from early on that were really inspired by organizations like UERU, although UERU didn't exist when I started teaching. I go way back farther than that. But I was at the University of Kansas, and I was privileged to serve as the inaugural vice provost and dean of undergraduate studies there. And I had the opportunity to lead a reform of and then oversee the general education program. So that was a really formative experience in my career. And then I moved on to Boston University, where I was fortunate to work as the dean of arts and sciences with Beth Loiseau, whom I'm sure many, certainly Steve knows well. She was one of the architects of the Boyer 2030 report. And at the time, she was the associate provost of undergraduate studies at BU and was really charged with creating a general education program, which became known as the BU Hub. And I played a key role in enabling that to be developed and to come out. Which I think is a really outstanding general education program that's actually highlighted in the report. And then I moved on to the University of Pittsburgh as the provost. I was somewhat less involved in undergraduate studies, but my vice provost, who is now my successor as the provost, Joe McCarthy, again, somebody that Steve, I'm sure, would know well, was very long involved in UERU. And I would say that one of the key things that we were focused on when I was the provost there and he was the vice provost was improving the advising system, because that's so critical, especially to first generation students being able to find their way, but really all students find their way through and to degrees and careers beyond that. And I think, like Lynn, I chose to take the leadership role at Portland State because of its longstanding commitment to social and economic mobility, fundamentally. I really believe that higher education offers that promise, but often fails to come through at scale. And to me, that's a grand challenge that is really worth embracing. So, we've worked on a strategic plan that really commits us to seeking excellence through equity. As I mentioned, one of our strategic imperatives is to drive the economic and social and cultural resurgence of Portland. But our first one is to seek to create those clear pathways that Lynn was talking about through, like for transfer students and for all students to make sure that they can achieve degrees, can achieve a high rate of success, and then achieve a return on their investments. Social mobility is really requires that. And that's requiring a lot of hard work. And, I think, requiring faculty to think differently about how they approach their teaching and research. I think Kim was emphasizing in the answer to the first question, as well as Lynn, the faculty who come to these institutions really are, motivated by similar goals of equity and excellence. And so it's easy for them to get on board with that ideology, that theory. They come to us with that. Getting down to the nitty gritty of how do you change your teaching practices in order to be inclusive, frankly, trauma informed these days, and connect the community, the students with the community, and engage them in the research. That is hard work, and it's what we're focused on. And it really is critical, I think, to undergraduate education and the success of our cities and our society.
First of all, I'll just do a little bit of a brief. I too am not one that like waxes on about my story. And in fact, much like I love the word serendipity, I never would have thought that I would end up where I am. In fact, I used to make jokes to my husband, what do you do all day long in those meetings? I can't even imagine. And of course, what do I do now, right? I grew up in the Midwest. I'm from Cincinnati originally. And as a girl, I found the environment relatively monolithic. So I was really pleased, like Lynn, to be given the opportunity, in part through financial support, to be able to study. I went to Rice University as an undergrad and found the city environment in Houston just absolutely transformative. It too is very close to the hub of the city, and it's such a rich, diverse landscape. And I'm a neuroscientist by training, and so it's funny when you look back on your undergraduate education, you'd think, oh, you got to work with faculty member X in biology or psychology. And actually what I remember most is a comparative religion class that I took at Rice, where each weekend we would go out to a place of different worship. And as I said, I found the environment that I grew up with, even though the environment wasn't limited, I think my experience, now that I look back, was relatively limited, to be able to take full advantage and understand both the differences and the cultural aspects that come with religion, but also the communalities that reflect key transitions in the lives of humans, really has stuck with me as a frame of both common and difference that's important to what we bring to our democracy and what we bring to our universities. I came up somewhat differently. My commitment and excitement around undergraduate education, because I started my career at a medical school, was much more mentoring undergrads in the laboratory. So oftentimes I would have 30 to 40 undergrads at any one time, working in my lab in various capacities. And I loved that experience of discovery, of being able to turn what a student is learning in the classroom and put it to place in a laboratory towards a solution, towards just that sense of excitement when you can accomplish something, or when you do your first data analysis and look, it works. That's so much fun to be a part of that. And my academic career was more up through the administrative career, leadership career was really up through the research side. So I was an AVC for research, and then VCR, VPR. And so the opportunity then to go from the University of Arizona as senior VP for research, again, a very well-resourced institution. Although funny, when you're in those institutions, everyone still complains about they don't have enough money. But when you've been in a different place and you're like, oh man, we really have more resources than you can imagine. I felt the hunger of, how do we turn this in a different way and return to some of the roots? And so I had the opportunity then to go to the University of Texas in San Antonio and worked with you, Steve, and immersed myself again in the undergraduate student success, open doors, build the research mission, and really build an institution. That's a very young institution. It's been only around for 50 years. And so I always talk about it like the branches are there, but you're helping grow new sprigs, where in a mature institution like Wayne State, a lot of branches, sometimes you have to prune them a little bit to grow in a different sort of way. And now being at Wayne State, to have that opportunity, it's kind of like you took University of Arizona and UTSA and wrapped it all in one, and that's Wayne State. So it's been a real joy. I mean, the days are hard and the days are long, and every minute's a different thing. But at the same time, it's the richness of when, I'll tell my colleagues sometimes when I've had a long day, what do? I walk through the student center. Because again, you can see that light of learning, the sense of being in the city of Detroit and taking full advantage of the assets. It's just a real joy and an honor and privilege to serve in the roles that we do.
How many things hand things over to Jennifer for the little time we have left for Q&A. It looks like there is a question.
Yes, thank you. I've been taking copious notes and learning so much from you all, so thank you for that. The question in the chat is actually based upon something that Chancellor Miranda talked about in terms of connections with community colleges and high schools as part of the mission of undergraduate education excellence. And there's inquiry that President Cudd and President Espy also maybe talk about how you facilitate those relationships with high schools and community colleges and how the transfer function and matriculation from high school affects your mission towards undergraduate education excellence. And I know President Cudd, Portland State just won a post-secondary student success grant related to your work with transfer students. So I might start with you, given that that's top of mind.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, something like 70% of our undergraduate students are transfers, and most of those are from community colleges. And so we work really hard to facilitate that. That grant is allowing us to work with a couple of Area 1s, Mount Hood and Clackamas Community College. But we work very closely, of course, with Portland Community College, which is our natural and biggest partner. And we have MOUs with each of them, but we also, you know, work very closely between departments and between schools to make sure, like Lynn was describing, the curriculum is closely connected. So our students know what, or potential students know what will transfer here and so forth. We also, you know, because we're in this urban setting, our students often actually live together. So there are private housing units near our campus where there are community college students from both of those community colleges that I mentioned, as well as Portland Community College, actually living together. So it is really a mashup of our students. But we can, you know, I do believe that we can do even better. And so I'm engaging with the president of Portland Community College in a really intensive work that's supported by the Aspen Institute and ASCU to make sure that the transfer pipeline continues and is really successful. Because frankly, as a nation, we are not doing very well at getting students from community college through degree programs. I believe that the numbers are something like this, that 80% of students who go to community college wish to get a 4-year degree, and 20% actually do. So we're trying to crack that nut. The other thing I would say is that right now, nationally and certainly in Oregon, we're seeing this drastic drop-off of students going from high school to college or community college. So that's a common issue that we're facing with our community colleges, and we're trying to work together to turn that around. And that's a really scary, I think, really scary prospect for the future of our democracy that we really need to work towards solving.
I don't have much to add other than to say that I think the relationship between urban serving universities and their community colleges is much stronger and richer than you typically find in a flagship. We all have a much larger proportion of transfer students. We're at 40%. And so, you know, that relationship is part and parcel of our mission. We, for example, have actually established, we rent from our local community colleges that are actually out in the counties beyond the city of Detroit. We have facilities that are actually there located on the community colleges itself to make that seamless. And so sometimes there's a lot of really interesting strategies that I think each of us employ that are really useful and worth considering at other institutions.
I'll just say, I won't add anything about our programming because I know we're short on time, but this sounds like a great topic for a USU webinar in the future, because the whole community college to 4-year institution connection, and to include some of our community college colleagues in that kind of webinar. So
great idea.
throw a pitch at you,
I
Jennifer.
love you. No, I love you, and I love that idea. So we will definitely be capitalizing upon that and put it in this webinar series because I think it is really rich. I want to take this time. I want to be sensitive to time. This has been such a full and rich learning experience. I think I'm so grateful for all of you to be a part of it. Thank you to our panelists for sharing both their stories as well as the stories of their campuses and what it is like to be on an urban serving campus, an urban serving research university, and be dedicated to the undergraduate experience. That is a balance, and you all have done a beautiful job of bringing the Boyer Report to life for us and to talk about openly about the challenges and opportunities of being at Urban Serving University and meeting the imperatives in that report. So thank you to you all, everybody who is a part of this. I appreciate the participants dedicating their time to this. We will have this recording available through USU's YouTube channel. So in case you want to revisit something or weren't able to capture the brilliance as quickly as you wanted to, it will be available, and you as well as please share that that's available to other folks in your networks. We'd love for them to learn from this as well. So thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope that the first month of 2025 goes well for all of you.
Thank you very
for
much.
the opportunity.
Great to see you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.